Hello folks, Emily and I are running a series of online events in preparation for European Coworking Day 2025, and that's on the 14th of May. And even if you're never going to run an event in European Coworking Day, coming to these workshops will be really useful for you. They're just an hour long, they're really interactive, and what we found personally with nearly all our work over the years is talking to other people on the same journey as us is so much more valuable than sitting in front of an online course and a video. And in these workshops, co-working space owners and community managers and people that are really keen on building their community by running better events in their co-working spaces gather together and share what's working and what's not working. And for Emily and I, since 2010, we really have run over 1,000 community building events, workshops, meetups, festivals, and most of those have been in co-working spaces in London and across Europe. So we know what works, what doesn't work, what tech to use, what tech not to use, what email system to use, how to talk to people, and how to make events that really build community. There's a link in the show notes, or find us online, DM us, or follow any of the London Co-working Assembly or Co-working Values podcast. Now, let's get into the show. Hello, folks. Welcome to another Co-working Values podcast. And this one, we're talking about the money with our good friend Hector. Hector, what are you known for, and what would you like to be known for?
Hey, Bernie. Good to be back with you. I'm probably known for my little newsletter that I send out to folks every Thursday, and helping people with their integration stacks. But what I'd like to be known for is creating things that help co-working businesses thrive.
I think you're known there. I think you're there already. Like, when I want, can you just give a quick backstory? Because I'd hate for people to think that you're just the guy with a newsletter on LinkedIn. Like, you know, you are one of. I'm not just trying to get on your good side here. You are one of the OGs in co-working. So when was your first co-working space? And somewhere we might be able to link back to the original podcast where we spoke about this.
Yeah, link in the show notes. So what my co-working story starts around 2013, where due to a series of unfortunate events, the market I was in a little island called Cyprus, for our European guests to know where that is, it went into a whole bunch of financial issues, and the banks all froze on a Friday. And I landed up helping ad agencies turn their now vacant offices into rented desk centers, because co-working wasn't a word people used back then. Fast forwarding really quick from there, helped spaces launch in Spain, France, moved back to the UK, helped some spaces launch in Manchester. Landed up, because of all the spaces I was working with, building a go to this website to book a co-working desk type website, which was called Desk & Co. Realized that I didn't want to be in the desk booking business, and spun out of that looking for another solution that was, what is another problem that all these spaces face that is more technically challenging to build? And it was the fact that all the members were buying the same set of services. So I founded a company called Included. It grew to essentially the largest shared perks program across 1,000 plus co-working spaces. That brought me to the US to lead expansion here. And in 2019, having built integrations with all the major platforms, I hated the fact that it was so hard for everyone to build integrations. Wrote a blog post, put that out there, that I want to start looking at this as a solution, or looking at solutions for this. Spoke to a few people, met Robert online, Robert Kropman, now co-founder at Syncaroo, co-founded the company, met him about 6 months after that in person, and have been helping companies build better, more seamless and integrated tech stacks since. And then if you remember, 2020 was a bit of an interesting year. I got sick and tired of everyone talking about the doom and gloom of how co-working and offices were at the end of their string, because everyone was never going to go back to the office again. But I knew that all these indie operators were providing spaces and support and community events, and I wanted to share those links with the people I knew. So I sent things I found interesting every week to about 6 people, including yourself, Bernie. And now that little newsletter is called This Week in Coworking and goes out on average around 4,000 leadership teams across all our channels every week.
Epic. I think was I like the second or third person to sign up for that?
I don't think you signed up. It was pre-GDPR, and I signed you up. You were like in the first six, because there were 6 people that I sent the email to unsolicited, and you were definitely one of those 6.
Oh wow, that's good. So just as you were saying all of that, I've still got on my desk here a bathtub to ballroom wristband. Right, I can't let it go. So I want to talk about revenue streams today, and we were talking a little bit before we came on, because lots of times, like the people you encounter in your work and I encounter in my work, they go, "Oh, this is going to be a really good deal. We're going to be billionaires for this," and then. Can you say how people get burnt out trying to make revenue? And that's how we'll jump into this.
Yeah. So, as anyone who's probably listening to this, or anyone who's worked anywhere near running a co-working space, for a very long time, the model was cut up the space or chop up the space and license that or rent that out to other people, which is great, but it's very limiting. You're limited by the square footage through which you can sell, or of which you can sell. So what a lot of folks started looking at is, what are the additional services or additional products and offerings that we can add to sell to either our existing members or to the public that don't require us to grow the space in square footage. And so folks started looking at things like virtual mail services, notary services, professional services, accounting assistants, all these additional things that you can kind of offer as a productized service or just a service to increase your revenue without growing your square footage. Where people start getting tripped up is in the pricing. When you think about, okay, let's say I've got a co-working space in let's say Islington, and I'm wanting to add virtual mail services. What the traditional thing is to do is to look at what everyone else is charging and charge something similar, which is great until you start looking at 6 months, a year down the line. You sold a whole bunch of these things, these widgets, these subscriptions, but it actually hasn't increased your profitability, and your team is increasingly burnt out and not wanting to come in on specific days. And that all happens because no one has really implemented the systems, the automations, or the procedures to make those revenue streams efficient. So we have this principle that I talk about with a bunch of my geeky friends, yourself included, about, there's good revenue and then there's great revenue. Good revenue is any money coming in is good, right? I don't want to take away from that. But if you're spending €1 for every, or you're spending €5 for every euro you bring in, your team's time, processing the sales, doing, correspondence, doing marketing, updating platforms, onboarding customers, chasing invoices. If you put all of that stuff across all the customers buying that product, sometimes you find that you're spending more in effort and in money than you're actually bringing in, which is a scary place to be, leading to burnout and leading to financial constraints or financial issues for the business. Now, obviously, if you systemize and you automate and you process all of that stuff, you land up at a point where you're making 30 cents on the dollar or 30 cents on the euro or the pound, as opposed to, losing money on that. And then you can kind of optimize that to get to 80 cents, 85 cents on the dollar. And that is the difference, in my opinion, between kind of just adding revenue sources for the sake of adding revenue sources and adding revenue sources that actually drive great returns for a business.
There's something that just kept on popping in my mind as you were talking is there's 2 things. There's one where someone who owns the space says we're going to do this, and they give it to the community manager. Mm-hmm. And it's like me saying, "Oh, run the football team, Hector." And you're like, and I think it's a great deal, and I think I've got a football team. And you're like, that is every Sunday morning for the rest of my life, cutting up oranges and giving out plasters. So they don't really think about how deploying it internally happens. And then I say this a lot, it's like, learn how to use whatever co-working space software you're using, all marketing software and stuff like that. Learn how to use it really, really well, because the amount of I'm sure you've never found this, the amount of people sort of copying and pasting email lists every time they send a newsletter from one system to another, and all that kind of stuff is, I think people hemorrhage. Is that your experience? Because you dig into this even harder than I ever will.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of both. You're absolutely right around the whole, like, I don't care how you implement this. Like, they believe that they're empowering their team to open up new revenue sources, but they don't give the team or the individual the actual freedom to choose the tooling or to get trained up in the tooling. And that brings us to your second question, or your second observation. When I add another product or tool or app into my stack without understanding how people are going to be trained up on it or making sure it connects with the rest of my systems, you're not just adding another to-do list item to that person's day or week or whatever cadence it is. You're actually stopping them from doing whatever else they were going to do. You're stopping them from touching base with that one member, reducing churn, following up with someone who came in an event, someone who walked in, because they're now distracted trying to figure out this new interface. That's the one piece. The other piece is none of the systems look the same, and none of them are set up with the same hierarchy of menus. So every time you want to jump between these two systems, our brain has to take a break and reassess what's on the screen in front of us, and then think, okay, what do I need to do? And then think, okay, where is the information I need to do this? You jump back to another tab or another app or another Excel sheet, and your brain does the same thing. So what is one to-do list item on someone's to-do list is actually 5-6 jumps between different interfaces and completely wrecking that person's workflow.
Yeah, the amount of stuff Alfred, you can see your clipboard history, the Alfred app for Mac, and like the amount of things on my clipboard where I copy and paste between apps. And I just started this year. I started using this app called Cortex, which is a little bit. It's like a less annoying version of Notion, but I hardly ever have to leave it. And I didn't realize how fast I could move, which is not that fast actually. Don't be too impressed, folks. But basically I write more because I can make notes in that and write. But before I go off on a tangent, like what I think one of the things I really wanted to ask you is, what are the revenue streams you see that people get like really pumped up and excited about, and they're actually like, bleeding money over the floor of the co-working space, and people don't realize until it's too late?
Yep. So I'm going to jump into that in a second, but I want to go back to the slight tangent you went on. And it's actually a really important thing to remember in your space. There are specific apps that specific people in your space will be 100% more efficient in than all the other apps. So you should always be designing your tech stack so that each team or each individual only has to use the least amount of different apps so that they can be faster to move, much like you are. So that's like definitely not something that should be overseen, and I don't want to bury that lead. Find the apps that your teams understand really well, and then make sure that everything else gets done automatically from that app so that they don't have to jump between systems. Now, as to the revenue sources,
can I ask one more geeky question? That I hear people say, I've heard someone say this today, like it comes complete with an app, and like, I don't know that many people that walk around co-working spaces running them and can actually run their space from their phone. I'm sure, but people say you can do that. Like, do you think that's possible, or is it just how you work as a human being rather than the capability of the app?
I mean, I think it comes down to the size of the space, right? We can't be naive and say that all co-working spaces, all flex spaces have the same team structure or complexity. But if you're an indie space, you owner operator, there's pretty much a lot you can do from a single app, but you're still going to need banking, you're still going to need invoicing, you're still going to need probably some things that are done better outside of that app. And I'm a big believer of really well designed modular stacks, where instead of everything being from one supplier, you have best in class solutions for each thing. So you have the best printing software, you have the best door access, you have the best visitor management. They don't all have to be from the same provider, but they all need to speak to each other. That way, I only need to look at my management system and it talks to the things that I don't want to look at. So in that way, you're still managing everything from one place. But if something needs to be tweaked on a specific app, you may need to log into that or pay a different subscription for that, or set it up slightly differently. But it's a better way of making sure that each of the touch points your customers come through are the best possible experience every time. So that's the one thing. Now, when you get to bigger spaces and you've got teams, you have a sales team, you have a marketing team, you have a front of house, you have accounting teams, you have investors, whatever. Each of these groups of people may have an app that they find easier and more useful in their day-to-day. Prime example, HubSpot, very, very popular for sales teams. Inventory management system, member management system, very popular or very intuitive for customer success or community teams. Accounting software, really good for accountants. Dashboarding, really good for stakeholders, investors. Now, just because each of these different groups are using a different app, that doesn't mean that they should have different data from each other. So if I am in the sales team and I update a lead that this person's just closed, the community team should see that in their community management system. The accounting team should see that in their accounting view. The investors or stakeholders, CEOs, execs should see that in the dashboarding view. It doesn't mean that I, as the salesperson, now need to log into the inventory system, the accounting system, etc., to put that information there, because that's not the best use of my time. And that brings us back to your initial question of use these same 4 groups, right? Let's say I've sold a virtual mail package, right? It comes through to the sales, it comes through the website via marketing to the salesperson. It comes into my HubSpot. I update it. Great, this person's interested. I close the deal. I send the link. I then have to go and notify the community team. They go into the inventory system, create the user account. That's great. Now log into the mail management system, create the account in the mail management system, send the KYC, get that information back, verify that this person is who they say they are. Get all that done, then send the invoice to accounting. Accounting then sends that through. Now, all this is happening. The execs have no idea that this has happened. Times that by 100, and you suddenly see you've blocked 4 different people in 4 different teams for essentially $25 a month. That is a terrible source of revenue, right? But in a world where we're at now, where it doesn't have to go to sales because it's booked directly via the website, it's gone through the e-commerce channel, sales is looped out, but it's showing that, hey, this customer is a mail customer. So maybe I can upsell them something else. Fantastic, sales is in line. The community team, fantastic. Someone's paid, it's in their inventory system. The membership's automatically been activated. The mail room account has been created. KYC thing has been automated. The account has been paid since it's e-commerce. The account now has a paid invoice and all the receivables are in place. And the exec sees that another sale has been done on a dashboard. Nobody other than the customer has made an action. So that $25 goes directly to the bottom line. That's pure padding of profits every time you sell one of those. Now, obviously, there's some service in there. If someone gets a letter, you have to scan it. But if you automate the rest of that as well, it's only one action instead of 3 people's actions. Then having accounting have to bill that person if they wanted to get it scanned or whatever mail-related thing happens. And so that's a very, very big pain that we're seeing with a lot of operators. They want to implement virtual mail. They're seeing that, some spaces are getting 30, 40, 50% of their revenue from virtual mail products or virtual office products. And they're like, well, I want some of that, but they don't really think through if 40% of the revenue comes from that, but you're losing money on every transaction, that's not a good place to be.
I've heard that exact same thing. Like, as you were saying there, I can see the people's faces where they goes, "I'm not paying for that," and then there's like someone dragging stuff around the building when they've got another million things to do. Like, they don't send the email newsletter because they're so busy, like having baskets with mail in and stuff like this.
Yep, exactly. And so you get things like that. I mean, that's one. We see the same thing with IT provisioning. Like, there are companies who need and want and are willing to pay for additional IT services, right? Dedicated IP, private VLANs, whatever the technical jargon stuff is. But if you cannot turn that on in one click, or turn it off in one click, or add it to their billing and have all the rest of the units updated, you can't afford to sell that product. You can't afford that additional upsell. And it comes down to catering, it comes down to events. You offer the service, you book out the space, you have to pay your staff member to be there. They then want, F&B, so you mark it up by a random 10%, not realizing that means your community manager, instead of selling the space to the people attending, is now setting up sandwiches and packing away dishes. And like, it all comes down to pricing and optimizing around the processes of that revenue or behind that revenue, so that you can turn it from good or meh revenue to great revenue.
So I have two questions I want to say before we jet, but I think, and you can disagree with me live on air, Hector, but I think this is why co-working space people should talk to other co-working space people. So because the amount of times people say, like, what's the best co-working space software, Bernie? And, I know which ones I like and which ones we know the people from and their legacy and everything like that. But depending on what situation you're in and depending on what the text, when we say tech stack, folks, we mean like how many different bits of technology you have in your building that all do stuff together. But that's a really important part of like working out how to do things and ask an expert, of course.
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely ask experts, especially folks who have the only skin in the game that they should have is they want you to succeed. And whether that's tied to you giving them a bigger contract later down the road or something like that, at least they're in the same kind of boat as you. But I do find that when it comes to pricing, especially for competitive non-physical products, discussing the money stuff is kind of taboo. And it's annoying that is the case. I think there are some moves being made where folks are anonymously sharing their pricing and profitability and benchmarking that against everyone else in the industry, so that everyone can charge better and more fairly. But it's still early days, right? I think a lot of the times, if you and I both ran co-working spaces in Valencia and we were both selling virtual mail services, and I had figured out a way to make it profitable, logically I would want to share that with you. But also, you're selling the same product to the same exact customer base. So there's that kind of friction there where people want to share, but they don't really want to kind of dig into how they make it successful when it's a product that they're both selling to the same customer base.
So did we answer what revenue streams look good on paper, but they don't in real life?
I mean, we dug into mailroom or virtual mail. We dug into IT provisioning, notary services. We didn't talk about notary services that much, but IT services we definitely touched on. We touched on the virtual mail, and we touched on a little bit of the F&B side. All three of those done right can be fantastic, easy upsells. Done wrong, they can cause huge pain down the road after you've got 500, 600, 700 virtual mail customers or IT people that you now have to service, and it's too expensive for you to do so. You're stuck between a rock and a hard place.
So is there something that is hanging around that you go, I can't believe more people don't do that in their co-working space? That
It's
is,
funny you should ask. I'm doing a deep dive now on like interesting new revenue sources and what we're calling the new revenue stack. And it's so fascinating to see things that make absolute sense if you partner correctly. Um, childcare, still a massive one here in the US. I know it's something that's it's really important in the UK as well. Um, just like running it as a babysitting service as opposed to a full licensed school, it's just a no-brainer. I love this idea of kind of having a library of things that Patch does really well in the UK. Finding ways to kind of monetize access to that to non-members, kind of creating that. And also alumni memberships. Like there are so many businesses that graduate from co-working spaces who want to still be involved. They still want to kind of get the newsletter. They want to come and do lunch and learns or attend things. And when they leave, you just kind of say bye to them instead of being like, hey, join our alumni membership. You get these additional benefits, you get these additional things, but it doesn't actually cost you anything to provide that. They're kind
I
of just
think that's
doing
one of
it.
the best things, like, because you have to put the effort in, and
Mhm.
so few people will go, oh, let's do that, and send them a, copy and paste newsletter. But I I know places where they've got so many people in that membership, and they
Mhm.
don't even live in the same city,
Mhm.
and they're in the Slack channel, and they do it really well, and because it's like at the core of their being, it
Mhm.
works really well. I think that'd be really hard to. I think that'd be really hard to go. Welcome to Mega Brand and our Alumni, because it would just be like having a Hilton hotel club card. But if you manage to like, there's a few places that have such a cult status.
Mhm.
It's like as if Quentin Tarantino ran a co-working space. He'd have a great Alumni um, section going on.
Yeah, I mean it's an interesting one, but I also think don't sleep on the fact you mentioned like the Hilton card. Like there is going to be a big play in the next couple of years for like loyalty points or some sort of reward program built around Flex Workspace. I am 190% certain of that. So how
Mm.
that plays into it, I'm not sure exactly, but
We're
definitely
working with a
a
space
big part.
now, and they're part of a big complex, and
Mhm.
they've got that loyalty thing built in. And I hate to sound so geeky and nerdy and tragic, but like I'm so excited about the loyalty thing, because you will never have to leave that place. And I actually want to move there just so I can get the loyalty points. I'm such a sucker for the loyalty point. It's devastating. But the way it all you can just the way it all works. And I know that's something you've been, that. Remember all those conversations about hyperlocal?
Mhm.
I thought that would go somewhere even better than it eventually did.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely something there. I mean, I still think that co-working spaces create so much, as you said, hyperlocal economic impact that someone's going to figure that out. And it probably won't be me, but someone will figure that one day, and it's going to be an absolute no-brainer that we're all going to be like, oh yeah, of course you can use your co-working points to buy a smoothie.
It'd be like when Steve Jobs turned up with the App Store. Oh, it's
Mhm.
so obvious. Like Elena Giroli in Creative Works does. She's just like in Walthamstow, which E17 in London. It's one of the places where a lot. I want to say all the co-working spaces, but a lot of the co-working spaces all talk to each other a lot,
Mhm.
and they get involved in local festivals and the art trail and stuff like this, and they just have these. I'm not. I don't know exactly how it works, but have these agreements between cafes and the climbing wall and stuff like this, so that it's there
Mhm.
and it works. And I'm sure they'd love an app or something to do it, but like it happens, but making it happen at scale, I think, is
Yep.
tricky.
Very. I tried. It's very, very difficult to get hyperlocal to scale.
So, like, have you got a newsletter, Hector?
I do. It's thisweekincoworking.com. Please join us. I'd love to share what I'm seeing, but also share your stories.
It's
So
almost as good as my newsletter. Can
I
you
wouldn't say that. I think you're onto something.
wait, can you just say about the deep, not the deep dives, the undercurrents thing? Can you
Mhm.
Can you explain that? Because it is worth going and geeking out on those.
Sure. So the newsletter we send out every Thursday is a summary of some of the most important, interesting, or inspiring stories from across the co-working world. What we've realized over the last 3-4 years of writing newsletters that there's trends that are between, like, lie in between the stories. They're not the story themselves, but if you look at enough stories, you realize that something new is happening. Undercurrents are our deep dives into those topics. So each undercurrent looks at one emerging trend that I like to say is bubbling just beneath the surface, and that I feel has the potential to drastically change how co-working spaces grow, make money, or a potential risk to them. The first pilot we did was a little bit late last year, called looking at fractional offices and selling co-working space or co-working offices to multiple businesses on different days. The last one that came out last week was a look at the evolution of e-commerce and selling direct to consumers, and why I think that the opportunity is there to become a bigger revenue source. The next one that comes out this month is all about AI agents and the different places that people are using these agentic AI systems within their operating businesses or operating stacks. Next month's one is about the new revenue stack. So the additional revenue sources that people are doing, interesting things people are doing from around the world. And then we've got a few more that are lined up and awaiting sponsorships. They all are underwritten by a sponsor who doesn't have any say in any of the work, but funds us to be able to kind of put the reports out there. All reports are released in 4 mediums: written, downloadable, audio, and video. And they are made free for everyone to try and grow the pie for co-working operators everywhere.
Beautiful. Before I go into the little end riff, what is an AI agent?
Great question. Download the Undercurrents in 2 weeks. No, an AI agent is essentially an autonomous piece of code that can perform a task without being directed. So it's an undirected workflow. Think of it as a system that looks over all the calls that come in, or a system that helps understand where to reroute an inbound sales lead, or a system that knows that these 5 tasks need to happen in an accounting system whenever this thing happens. But you do not program it to do that. You create a parameter, you can give it a persona, it can be interacted with via text, email, however, and it goes and does the thing. And if it gets stuck in specific ways, it asks for help. And if it doesn't get stuck, it just does it and then saves that result or that task as done somewhere else. It's a bit more of a useful AI as opposed to you asking an AI system to do something. It's an AI system that waits for a trigger or waits for an action, and then goes, given the parameters that's been given, to go and do a task.
Is it like a super intelligent Zapier?
I mean, Zapier is digging into agentic now as well, or what's called agentic AI. It's more like, if you remember, like If This Then That.
Yes,
The kind of
loved
competitor
it.
of Zapier. It's kind of like that, but you don't have to define every step, right? You use the advancements in AI to be like, given this basic instruction, as if you're explaining it to maybe an 8 or a 10-year-old, these are the things I want you to do with it. And then you train it up just like you would an employee. Don't employ 8-year-olds, please. It's illegal everywhere. But like, you train it up to get better and better at that task. And every time it does it, every time it gets stuck, it learns from that. And so you then have this virtual staff member who supports your team to get things done.
Amazing. There's people ask me that and I don't know how to answer it. So I'm going to just send them this podcast at the end.
Send them this podcast, and definitely send them to twic.co/UC for Undercurrents.
And we'll link to that in the show notes. And folks, it's at the time of recording this, the European Coworking Day is 6 weeks away. There's links in the show notes to all of that. There's how to sign up, how to follow the Co-working Values podcast on LinkedIn. And then Hector and I are custodians of the gigantic LinkedIn co-working group. So there's a link in the show notes to that as well. And wherever you are in the world, be careful out there. It is a jungle. Say goodbye, Hector.
Bye-bye. Thanks, everyone.